Hello, and welcome to What Moves Us, the podcast where we ask what moves us, or more accurately, what's going to move us in future.
With the Rail Innovation Group's Johannah and Liam Henderson, we look at debates, themes, and decisions of the minute that will impact on the way we get about in the future.
Hi, Johannah. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
I am extra happy because do you know what today is? Do you know?
Today?
It's the 30th of May, 2024, which is 5 years since we published our first podcast. 5 years.
I can't believe that. Who'd have thought?
Who would have thought? And obviously, nothing has happened at all in the last 5 years. So this podcast, our anniversary, will be very, very short.
Actually, nothing has happened.
Well, I guess the biggest change physically is that we're doing this on Zoom because we did our first one. I listened back to our first one yesterday, and the biggest change I noticed is how slowly I was speaking, because I obviously read somewhere to speak very slowly on our podcast. So I was speaking like this.
Were you really? I remember. Was there lots of noise because there was roadworks? No, it wasn't. It was Crossrail works, wasn't it? So actually, something has changed. Crossrail has been delivered.
Yes, we were in the House St Barnabas in Soho, which is now closed down. It was a charity place that's closed down.
Why is it closed?
Many reasons. I think they would say COVID. That was another change, which we'll come on to and we'll discuss. But the biggest change for you is that you had come from Brighton the last time we spoke in person in London, and now you're way up in the Arctic Circle.
Not quite. I'm sure I'm still closer to London than I am to the Arctic Circle, although it might feel like it sometimes.
So you made the move to experience another nation's transport in Scotland. Yes. And I'm still in.
I am experiencing another nation's transport, and I think the experience has been enlightening. And I think the experience is even more enlightening recently since because I've been having trouble integrating into the community. I've taken a local job at a restaurant so I can make friends. And I hear all about the transport problems of getting to work, particularly on Sundays.
Well, again, I'd like to come on to that, which I have, because obviously we said some notes, we shared some notes. So I was just looking at the other big changes that have happened. Yes, the last time, well, in 2019, you worked for HS2. You don't anymore.
No, I was just leaving, wasn't I? So I was probably about 3 weeks away from leaving when we started the podcast. And I've been freelancing ever since. I've moved house. I have a new business, and we've been awarded funding with Innovate UK to design a new train seat for sleeper services.
Yeah.
So things have changed, and I've been doing lots of freelance consultancy and seeing into the world of how hard it is to be a startup.
Yes, well, that's the point of the Rail Innovation Group, isn't it? However, there is one particular issue that we need to address right up the front of this podcast, Johannah. Going back to our very first episode, if you listen to it, you promised me a sacator, and I have never had such a sacator.
Did I really promise you a sacator?
You did. You spent 5 minutes telling us all about Johannah's patisserie in Oakham, and then you promised to bring me a sacator, your most popular cake, which I have.
It's not the only promise I failed to do, is it?
Just putting that out there for the next time you're in London. Still waiting for my sacator.
It's not the only promise I failed to deliver, though, is it?
I'm purposely scooting away from that. As I put a red X in my notebook. Right. So getting down to business of the pod. Yes, we did. We've done 62 episodes in the last 5 years. A lot of episodes, a lot of talking. And we started very originally with the question of what's the point of transport? And we both said that we wanted to focus on the human aspect of transport and how decisions being made affect people rather than just the numbers of transport investment and business cases. I thought it was ironic that we had referred to the recent European parliamentary elections when the UK was still electing MEPs. We talked about whether transport, whether you should include well-being as part of the business case in transport. So hopefully we've managed to cover the human aspects of transport in our discussions over the years. I know that we have pivoted a bit more to talk about businesses and small businesses and digital skills, but I think we tried to keep, the point of transport.
Yeah, I think we've always talked about whether it's because I think we've still stuck to, speaking about diversity and the impact of some of these policies on people. And the thing about, startups, and SMEs, and I've been thinking about this a lot because of my own experience as well, of just how difficult it is. And I think we often forget whether it's the passenger or whether it's the person trying to, get into the industry, and that these are all people issues. They're not, it's not about the bigger policy issues, and that they're all things that affect people. So if you've got a big business that isn't returning a call or isn't doing something that's said that they would do, or you're failing to win business, or you can't talk to the right person, they're affecting a person, their livelihood, and that, and I think, people need to understand that a lot more, because because I'm thinking about, sort of like the money as well, because startups, you're on a lean budget, and I don't think people really realise how, hand to mouth you can be living when you're starting your business. Yeah, and so you can't really wait months for a decision.
Yes, or indeed, as is the case a lot has been the case, a lot of decisions are then reversed, which also doesn't help.
Yeah. But I think it's interesting you mentioning about well-being as well, and whether, well-being should be part of business case. And I think that's also because of what's happened since we started the podcast with the COVID pandemic and the impact that has had on people's mental health. And, how there's been more people are feeling anxiety, stress. People. I mean, if reporting is to be believed, lots of people are off sick with issues with their mental health, and that's so. I think that's interesting, and whether there should be more policies that do focus on well-being, and that, because transport, if is not delivered effectively and doesn't meet people's needs, actually adds to people's anxieties. Because as I was alluding to at the beginning, I've sort of like started getting some insight into sort of, for young people, how difficult it is to get around when you want to work. Yeah, and recently there's been quite a lot of timetable changes here, and I'm talking particularly with buses around Pitlochry, Perth, and Aberfeldy, where sort of like the triangle where most people live, and it means most people can't get to work on a Sunday now, and this is an area that relies on tourism. So of course it's a 7-day a week, 363-day a year industry, pretty much. I took off Christmas Day and Boxing Day because some businesses do operate on Boxing Day and Christmas Day, but not all of them do. But and that's what I think policy fails to discover. If we want to meet net zero goals, and if we want to, and that we've got to provide good public transport, because otherwise it will always be a car first policy. It will always be looking at electric cars. It will never be looking at public transport solutions, and you'll never develop a business case that that stands up financially, because you're not getting people out of their cars.
Well, on that, I had some bullet points of things I wanted to discuss, and one of them, actually, the last one, was the diverging policy of transport between the nations of Great Britain. So obviously Wales and Scotland have their own transport policy. And I thought that your response to it would be that everything is better in Scotland because it's being vertically integrated. But what you just said has indicated that maybe it's not so glorious.
But the trouble is that Scotland is better, but we're not on a very high benchmark. Scotland has the same issues as England has in terms of funding and availability of funds and post-COVID recovery and things like that. And if people aren't using buses or trains, then of course the easiest way to save money if you're not getting revenue is to cut the services. So So, so things are better in Scotland. And I think also they're probably better in Wales as well. So I think Scotland is better because it has a national transport strategy. But if you don't have the funding to deliver it, then you still have the same issues as England has in terms of funding. And as people know, that a lot of funding for Scotland comes from the Barnett formula, and if tax revenues aren't going up in the UK as a whole, then the funding isn't also coming to Scotland, despite the fact that Scotland pays higher taxes. But Wales is also probably having similar sorts of problems. And while, Wales is probably one step ahead of where Scotland is, which also has integrated transport through Transport for Wales as well, because they also have, do they have their, is it actually called the Wellbeing Act?
No, it's something about future generations, isn't it?
Future Generations Act. So of course, when they are thinking about public services, they do have to think about what that impact is on well-being. So they do have to, and I think that's where where they're trying to come about, some of their policies with 20-mile-per-hour roads and not having road building, that because they're really trying to bring that into focus, because of course that well-being and transport does not just mental health, but it also contributes to your health as well.
Yes. Yeah.
But you can have all the policies that you want. If you haven't got the funding, you're still not going to be able to deliver, are you? Or if you haven't got the passengers.
Yes. I don't know what the lesson learned, though, is. I've obviously noticed over the last 5 years there's been more and more talk of city region type transport networks, focused on, as in like transport for West Midlands or transport for Greater Manchester. And those more, I guess another pattern is that more of those regional authorities, metro mayors, have been created and elected in the last 5 years. So you'd imagine that if that is a successful policy, it's being grown.
So devolution is good because obviously people who live locally know what they need locally, and so they should be making their own decisions rather than from Whitehall. So obviously that is good. But you still need the funding. Yeah. And I think as some of the decision on HS2 is showing, and how short-sighted that will be, that decision on HS2, in terms of creating a commuter route to Birmingham now, rather than what was going to be the start of a high-speed network around the UK, is that actually that's going to stop, that's going to prevent growth in Manchester for the northern towns, and also it's going to prevent growth in Scotland.
Yes. Well, we've covered off another one of my bullet points. HS2 ailment. I think, well, that actually, sorry. So in terms of changes that have happened, I think one of the things that I've noticed over the last 5 years is people's anxiety. You talk about mental health, but as a small business or SME in rail, the owners of those companies' anxiety has not been helped by the amount of reversals that have happened, whether it be HS2 or whether it be the quite confusing start of Great British Rail, is or isn't happening, we're not really sure. Then COVID, then patronage going down during COVID, hoping to get it back, and the funding and the money available, and then now people don't really know what's happening with the rail operations, is that though these are big national things, when all this amount of uncertainty happens, it does trickle down to the small suppliers at the very end of the supply chain, so almost at the mass bottom of the pyramid of the supply chain, is that all of these decisions are just compounding the difficulty of trying to do anything or trying to run a business in the transport industry. So I think
you can't invest, can you?
Well, you can't invest, and you can't rely you can't even rely on a contract that you think you might have. Well, for example, when you might be told to focus on climate change type things, but then the climate change policy on the focus on mitigating climate change has been reversed by the government. So then we have to try and pursue something else. And then there seem to be, for some reason, the last 2 years have been really anti-active travel. So in 2019 government that was elected came in really focused on active travel, gear change, I think it was called, and linking cycling, walking, scooting to public transport and having obviously a dream network. And then that seems to have been cut and the funding removed. And so anyone we even did a report, Parcels of Passengers, on integrating bikes, taking packages on bikes, putting onto the national rail. But then the focus and the funding for that's been removed. And so how are you supposed to focus or work out your long-term strategy to grow, to scale up in that environment?
That's the point. I mean, because it's, and I know, our discussion is about small companies, but it's affecting everybody. If the government wants to know why we haven't got growth and why we haven't got productivity, they've caused it. They've caused it by, I guess almost, and this is where the difference between maybe Wales and Scotland really is, because they do have transport strategies that set out the long-term vision, and they're not limited to the personality who's in the job. And that is the really big difference. They've set where they want, they've set their roadmap, they set where they want to go, and it's being consulted upon. And that's the big difference between England and Scotland and Wales, is the fact that you've got that. So you do get a bit more stability in terms of the investment and where you're going. Whereas
I would just say that that's because the party of government hasn't changed in those two nations since those policies were set.
No, that's true. But I mean, do I get a feeling that they would change? I mean, because whilst we're still a couple of years away from the next Scottish parliamentary election, I don't get the impression it would change that significantly. I think there'd be a review, but I don't think the overall direction of travel would change. Well, there would be no, because I think that's the thing, because whilst you've got, another thing that's, happened on, so we think, back to sort of like 2019, we were at the start of the Williams rail review, as it was known then.
Yes.
And here we are. We even did a podcast when it came out, when the rail review came out in 2021. And here we are in 2024, and not a sausage has been delivered.
Hey, they've named where it might or might not be headquartered in the future, should it be set up properly.
And allegedly, some work has been going on at it. Well, if you want to be positive, but I don't ever want to be positive.
So we did that. I remember that podcast, and we actually thought that the original plan was quite good. It was all we said, it would have to go through in entirety. Well, I think at the moment the name has stuck, and I see that obviously in the general election campaign, the Labour, as far as I'm aware, the Labour manifesto will say that we will commit to Great British Rail, but it's not going to be the same as the Great British Rail that was in that original report.
Yeah. And of course, some of the biggest commitments, because there were 62 commitments on it, wasn't there? And some of the biggest ones have already been dropped. And we already know, some of them will even be dropped by Labour if they haven't already been dropped, because one of the, obviously the ticketing, anything to do with ticketing has been dropped.
Yes.
So there won't be one body delivering the ticketing. There won't be, I think I was reading Labour this morning won't do any more devolution than is currently planned. They will have the guiding mind, and that will be it.
Yes, you did see that. I read the same article of me that it may be a situation. So the plan is, as each operating contract expires, it gets absorbed into the public sector. So nationally owned rail operators, which means that because Transport for London commissions the overground separately, London would be the only bit that still had private sector operators.
And potentially Merseyrail?
Not sure.
Because that's...
the article I read didn't have that.
Yeah, because I think that is also contracted separately as well. So, yeah, so I think at the podcast, our hope was that it wouldn't just be, or hope and a fear was that it wouldn't just be a rearranging the deck chairs. And I think at the moment, we haven't even really had a successful rearrangement of deck chairs.
Started.
Well,
we'll see, because we have no certainty now we're just in an election, so we'll wait and see.
And I think, sort of like, given that what started the rail review was the May 2018 timetable meltdown, you almost wonder, if you'd have done nothing, would we have been in a better position than we are now?
I think COVID meant that something had to change.
But it hasn't really changed. I mean, if you were, going back to our, focusing on the human and the user, if you were standing at a platform in Manchester, you wouldn't think things are better than they were 6 years ago, which is part of, that timetable meltdown, because everybody focused on the Thameslink meltdown because everybody could see it because it was in London. But actually, Thameslink has pretty much settled down. But they're still experiencing all sorts of problems with the northern routes. Performance is worse than it was 6 years ago. Still, people can't rely on it.
If only there was a national infrastructure project to improve work in the north.
If only.
Yes. Well, talking of standing on a platform and is your train service any better, living in London, my train service is wildly better because I can get the Elizabeth line, mainly when I go to Heathrow. But it's very useful for strange little journeys that you wouldn't think of.
I mean, what sort of journeys?
Well, I live in South London, so most of the time journey planners tell me to go up to the West End and then get the Elizabeth line across to the city or beyond, not take the Northern line directly. So it's sort of funneling people onto that east-west.
Do you think it's doing it because it knows there's more capacity? Unless it's obviously it must be faster.
It is faster. It has unbelievably long dwell times at each station, which I assume will get tightened up at some point. You do wait a very long time at each station, so I imagine if you shorten those, you could probably get another service in. But either way, it's very nice. It's fast. It's good. And it's an example of, I don't know, it seemed to have escaped. It seemed to have gone through the entire construction period without being value engineered down in quality or visual looks. So it actually looks like a really good, nice railway.
Yeah, I guess that was because the city paid for it, didn't they?
No, it was a third. I remember that.
So you go. So that was potentially. And did DfT cough up when they needed more money? They were too far along, weren't they?
I do remember that was. We were having these discussions very early on because there was about another. Was it 500-ish million needed to finish it?
Something like that. And of course, they had all the problems with Bond Street Station, didn't they?
Which is open and fine. Nice now.
And that's the thing about these big infrastructure projects is, I mean, to a certain extent, we should almost accept that they are going to cost a lot more than we think they are in the beginning. But when they're open, everybody's going to love it.
Well, that was the joke when I remember listening to a podcast, a news podcast at the time when HS2 was cancelled, the northern bit, and the justification, the reason for cancelling it publicly was that it was wildly over budget and going up in price. But then obviously the news commentator was saying, how many people sit on the Eurostar going to Paris going, oh, how much did all this cost? No one cares. But the fact, it's just factored in that we needed that.
But that's the thing, isn't it? Once you use it, you think, well, why didn't we do it sooner? Because that is the thing, is that if we were just to commit to it and just, and this was, as was intended, because that was why it was called High Speed 2. This was meant to be a whole rail renaissance of fast, or not even necessarily fast, but new intercity lines that could free up capacity on local lines, but also, thinking about that, net carbon and and meeting our climate goals, is that the UK should be building this stuff because we need to remove domestic flights. Oh no, we must be one of the only European countries not thinking about this in terms of what our train infrastructure can do, because we're so small. We should be doing this stuff.
Yes.
Yeah, and it would be fabulous for our economy. And I don't know what the airline lobby say, but I'm sure mixed in with, with discussions with airlines and airports and that, they'd much rather have international flights than domestic flights because they're more revenue enhancing.
I don't know. I think they'd say they're private companies, and if no one flew their planes, then they wouldn't run them. People on the
But also it would free capacity for more international routes, which are more profitable. Because like Scotland to London is not a profitable route because it's subsidised by government, isn't it?
I don't know.
It is, which is the ridiculous thing that I found out since I've moved to Scotland, is this is cheaper to fly than it is to go by train.
Yes, I imagine it is.
By quite a bit.
Rule of view. Right. Let's end on positives, shall we? What was your favourite thing we've talked about or episode from the last 5 years, Johannah?
My favourite was actually when we didn't talk about rail, when we talked about buses. One of the really early ones when we were talking about, because I think it was more to do with integrating transport and just how you need that integrated transport, and the fact that, and I've been visiting it again today because of the fact that so many people rely on buses to get around, particularly rural locations, but to connect into rail and stuff like that. And it was I think in 2018 the Transport Select Committee had reported that, was it 11 million had been lost from funding, and that there was a 18% decrease in services. I can't remember all the stats off the top of my head. Well, it's even worse now, and that's despite the introduction of a £2 fare in England, to try and get that. But I think where the £2 fare is, bus growth is up, but it's not everywhere, and I think we need that. So it was my favourite episode, just purely because it just throws up the inequalities in Britain if you don't have a good bus service.
Right. True. My favourite episodes, it was a series of episodes we did quite early on when COVID happened and we had to stay at home. We switched and did short episodes called What Moves Us Express, where we spoke directly to the people running, the SMEs, the startups that we have as members. And so just finding out how they were responding and pivoting very quickly and using the time to develop new solutions and do a lot of R&D to prepare for when obviously things adjust.
See, that's funny, isn't it? Because those times, despite the crisis, they were quite exciting times, weren't they? Because because people were thinking about innovation. Yes, and what how they could respond, what the recovery needed to look like.
Yes.
And we seem to have lost that spirit, haven't we?
Well, we've got the ideas. Don't know.
I think as a population, we're
for another crime.
I think as a population, and maybe it's just because of the reporting. I don't know, maybe, but things don't feel very positive. And I don't think it's necessarily the news that's negative. It's just that we seem ground down by stuff.
Yes.
Rather than thinking about what it is we can do. Because it's like when you listen to sort of like phone-ins and stuff like that, everyone's moaning about stuff rather than thinking, well, what can we all do to improve it? How can we be better?
Talk radio has been the same forever.
Yeah.
Why we don't do a phone-in. What have you learned about podcasting in the last 5 years?
I don't know. What have you learned?
Well, I learned not to speak so slowly.
I don't know because I never listened to myself, so I don't know. Do I sound good? Do I sound
Have
bad?
you not listened to these after you've recorded them?
Sometimes I do.
Wow.
I might listen to the first 5 minutes.
Right.
Some people say we're very good.
Some people say. People say. And then lastly,
we should do them more often. That's what I've learned. We don't do them often enough.
I'm still waiting for the schedule, Johannah. What positives only is what would you like to be talking about in 5 years' time?
That HS2 has been built and that phase 2 will be built, as well as a phase 3 and a phase 4. So everything reinstated.
Okay.
So can I have 2 things that I want to be talking about? Because that's my big thing.
Or make it 5.
Make it 5. Have I got to have 5 things? That was.
Go on, what's the second one?
My second one is that we get better innovation. And I think I'm talking from sort of like being sat on both sides now. So I've been in corporates that have tried to innovate, that find it really difficult to get new ideas, to get traction of new ideas within organizations because people are wedded to the old way of doing things. So I would like to think that people who are not necessarily don't have innovation in their title, don't think they can do innovation, to just be curious and to be open to the idea that there could be a different or a better way of doing something. But also from a startup point of view, and maybe this is a third one as well, is that I think also startups probably need to get better at innovating as well. Because sometimes what you're developing isn't necessarily what the market or the business needs or whatever. But I think there needs to be a lot more support for startups to get their idea and get them more fresh. And this isn't just support from mentoring or whatever. It's financial support, because I think one of the things that we're finding, we get a lot of stuff from Innovate UK. We're getting a lot of stuff, a lot of support from Innovate UK, but we don't necessarily have the funding to be able to, the cash flow to be able to take up all the opportunities. So I think there needs to be a lot more support from government to help startups once they have an idea and they've got to their prototype, and that to not just be reliant on filling in a grant and an application, because if there's value in the product, then they should be on a proper program to deliver it.
Right. Okay.
So I want to sort of see more of that maturity, I think.
Right. I would like to be able to say in 5 years' time that a government has been in for 5 years and we've had some sort of stability of policy and strategy. And we know what time there was a plan and it was...
You've just gone for the simple thing.
I think that would lead to loads of investment and decisions and people being able to take risks or whatever else.
We should set that into the Rail Innovation Group manifesto.
Right.
Our 5 manifesto asks.
Stability. Make a decision and stick with it. Right. On that note, I'll speak to you in 5 years.
Oh, I should have got the champagne
out. Oh. Right. We'll speak soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to another episode of What Moves Us. We hope we moved you. For more episodes, you'll definitely want to subscribe to our channel.
Till next time.